Welcome to BikeFans.com's exclusive series, Jay's All-Out-Blitz, a look inside the key challenges and issues facing NFL players and the Minnesota Vikings in 2013. And now, your host, former NFL linebacker Jay Foreman.
Welcome, everyone, to our September 11th edition of Jay Foreman's All-Out-Blitz series. I'm Tom Moore, better known to most of you as Purple Pain. I'm joined by former NFL linebacker Jay Foreman. And Jay, we've got a lot to talk about after a Week 1 went completely off the tracks for the Vikings on offense and defense in their 34-24 loss to the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, it was a rough game. You thought that the game was going to go the Vikings' way when Adrian Peterson, hit that long run, but it was a hard-fought game that got out of hand at the end. They certainly had their chances, so you would have liked to see a playoff team, a playoff caliber team take advantage of those, but we didn't Week 1.
Well, Jay, during the preseason, you and I spoke about it. The Viking coaches kept saying that they were purposely showing bland schemes on offense. Yet when the season opened last week in Detroit, the game plan seemed to be very uninspired and predictable. When you look at offensive coordinator Bill Musgrave's plan of attack, what would cause him to run what I call a 1960s-style offense in 2013? And is it his limitations at quarterback or his own limitations on his offensive creativeness?
Oh, I think it's a little bit of both, but I would probably lean towards the side that he's making his offense around what his personnel and primarily what his quarterback does and doesn't do well. And you remember he was the coordinator of some successful offenses, so I don't really think it's his philosophy. I think it's more of a quarterback thing, Christian Ponder, with his confidence and how well he's done, not only in preseason games, but what they saw in practice and all the offseason and last year, what he's good at, what he isn't good at. It seems like they know he's very limited, so they're trying to keep him very, very condensed as far as exposing him to bigger mistakes. I think maybe they're trying to build up his confidence, but as a player, you should be very confident in every game and every situation that you're in, because that's really a big ingredient in how you're going to perform well.
Kind of a weird stat that came out after Week 1 is the Vikings faced the highest percentage of 8-man fronts on plays. Detroit ran it 36% of the time against the Vikings, and yet Musgrave continued to call plays for Adrian Peterson to run straight in the teeth of that defense, and it seems that that's just kind of a give-up strategy and hoping somehow Peterson can turn a nothing into a big gainer. Why would you do that? Why would you keep hammering at an 8-man front with the run?
Well, for a variety of reasons. One, the biggest reason is that it didn't matter if they had an 8, 9, 10, 11-man front last year. Adrian Peterson was able to rush for over 2,000 yards. So he's obviously, seeing the first run, he's in great shape. He's a great running back. But you expect them to have all 7 guys locked up, and Adrian Peterson can make one guy miss and have a big game, which he did in the first play of the game. I don't really think that it's a give-up strategy. I think sometimes it's running it to see if Adrian can pop a big run, but then also to set up some other passes. But I think when they chose to pass, it was very vanilla. I think the Lions just looked at the preseason games, and that's exactly what they got in the first game of the season. So therefore, their offense, from a passing standpoint and a big play, explosive play standpoint, was stymied. And they have enough talent on that side of the ball with Greg Jennings. Obviously, Adrian Peterson helps out in the passing game. You saw Jerome Simpson. You got Rudolph, the tight end. You even got Carlson, the other tight end. You have enough offensive firepower to be more effective offensively than that.
When you were playing in the NFL, is it pretty common for a quarterback, if he steps up and he sees 8 guys in the box, for him to audible out? And if that's the case, why wouldn't Minnesota do that? Or maybe they're telling Ponder not to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're facing a guy like a Dan Marino, Brett Favre, obviously a Peyton Manning, and they see an 8-man front, they have the green light, per se, to check to any pass or even another run they think that's going to work out better. Now, it might be in the Vikings case where Christian Ponder doesn't have that ability or that right to veto the calls. Maybe it's because of his lack of playing experience or his lack of confidence in the game plan. So you just don't know what's really factual or not, just because we're not in the meetings. We don't know, but it looks like they have a pretty tight leash on what he can and can't do at the line of scrimmage.
In the offseason, the Vikings traded up to get wide receiver Cordarrelle Patterson, and he showed some pretty good flashes and looked electric in the preseason. But then on Sunday, they only put him in on 5 offensive plays. From your perspective, Jay, even if the playbook is overwhelming to Patterson at this point, couldn't they have him run some straight go routes or take a reverse on offense?
Yeah, they could have done some more things. They could have asked him and brought him in and maybe had 15 or 20 plays what he knew inside and out. I was very surprised that he only played a handful of plays, considering, one, that he's the number one draft choice, two, he puts fear in the defense and the defensive coordinator's eyes, obviously with his speed and his big playability with run after the catch. And then also, three, he played well in the preseason, so you'd think that as the season goes along, and when they started yesterday at the first game of the season, you would think that they would have him in for more than 5 plays. It's almost like they wasted him being active for only using him 5 plays. It really was odd to me to why he wasn't playing a significant role in that offense on Sunday.
You mentioned Patterson, putting fear in defensive coordinators and defenses. Does a rookie like that, even though they've got a reputation and they're raw, do they still put fear in you at this stage of their career, or do they have to do something on the field first before people really give them that kind of respect?
Well, I mean, he's done enough in the preseason for him to have respect. You respect any player that's out there playing in the NFL, let alone somebody with his athletic ability and his big playability. I wouldn't say it's fear, because obviously defensive players will tell you we don't operate on fear, but I think that you have to respect his ability to take you deep. And of course, he's going to gain more respect as he gets a bigger role and has bigger plays. But when you're lined up against him, you have your scouting report on him. He's big, he's fast, he played well in the preseason, and he can run by you if you don't play your technique right. So I think, he would have strike a little fear in the defensive back's eyes, and then also in the coordinator as well.
Hopefully we'll see more of it next week in Chicago. And as I turn from the receivers to the quarterback, I'm not quite sure what to say about Christian Ponder's inefficiency at quarterback on Sunday. He threw some passes that made you scratch your head. He was constantly off target, and even many of his completions required Herculean catches by his receivers. What's wrong with him at this point in time? And is it a result of poor schemes that are designed by Musgrave, or is it really on Ponder?
Oh, well, I think where the passes are located, that's a quarterback thing. That's not a scheme thing. So I think obviously he needs to become more accurate, more confident. I think it's a confidence problem with him. I think he's not fully confident in his abilities. He hasn't had a lot of success. I mean, let's face it, the Vikings rode Adrian Peterson all year last year, and Christian Ponder had a couple games where he was very efficient on short pass plays where Rudolph would break some tackles or Jerome Simpson would make some great plays. But he's never had that big, 250-plus yard game where he's not only hitting receivers on intermediate routes, but he's hitting some long balls. So I think that it's a confident thing. And I think that when the coaches see that you're not confident, they're not going to call plays as if you're confident. So I think it's something that they're really going to have to work with him on the mental side of the game to get bigger and better results on the field.
Well, long considered a strong suit on this team is the offensive line, and they've really struggled in the preseason. They did again against Detroit and looked almost inept in the ability to stop them, both on pass rush as well as run defense. What is going on with this veteran unit? And from your perspective and what you saw on Sunday, why does second-year left tackle Matt Kalil look so overwhelmed after a standout rookie season?
Well, I mean, Detroit has talent-wise, one of the best defensive lines in the league, and they have a great coach in Jim Washburn that came out to Detroit, and he's inspiring them. They're all playing well. They all came in shape. When you saw a couple of the articles in the offseason about Detroit, all they talked about is how that defensive line is dominating the whole training camp. So I don't think it's anything different than what they've been doing in training camp, but then it's also a talent thing, and maybe they're getting a little bit more mature in Detroit. Now, as far as Kalil, everybody's able to have a bad game. He didn't play up to his ability. I look for him to rebound. He's a good kid. He had a great rookie year, so he'll get it together. The continuity for the offensive line just isn't there as it was last year, but it's something that they can get very quick. They need that one game where they're hammering people, and Adrian Peterson is going to have that big, 150, 200-yard game. We'll get it back very quickly. I think they're a cohesive unit, but they're just not out of the gates yet, per se, and they should get it out this week, hopefully.
Well, VikerGirl from Minneapolis wants to know if the players actually panic when they have such a poor opening day performance and loss, and how much does this type of a loss concern the players?
Oh, well, I think a lot of players, especially the veteran players, they know it's a long season. It's a 16-game season. There's going to be 16 teams that have one loss after the first week. It's not panic mode if you lose your first game. The biggest thing is you want to play better and win your second game, because nobody likes to start 0-2, and I think it's like 88% of the teams that start 0-2 do not make the playoffs. So this is a big week for the Vikings. It's going to be probably more intense in practice. to when you go out there the first game of the season and don't play well, and essentially in a lot of ways gave the game to Detroit or didn't take advantages of the opportunities that Detroit gave the Vikings. It doesn't sit well with a lot of guys, and they're a veteran team for the most part, especially on defense. They have some good veteran leaders, so they're going to have the guys inspired, and they should bounce back in week 2.
Well, fans have long been concerned about Leslie Frazier and this staff being unable to make adjustments when things aren't going right in the first half. They tend to go into the locker room, come out in the second half, and the game plan looks exactly the same. And that happened again against Detroit. Do you see many in-game adjustments being made by this staff?
Probably not enough, but I think that sometimes when you don't make a lot of adjustments, that tells you two things, and this is what I would tell the fans. One is that you think that you're beating yourself at that point. And what I mean by that is if you're turning the ball over and you're missing tackles or missing checks on third down, that doesn't have anything to do with a game plan. That just has to do with the Vikings not taking advantage of the opportunities. And also to tell you, I think that they have a lot of confidence in their game plan, and Detroit hadn't done anything that they hadn't seen before, just that they need to execute better. I think that's what Leslie Frazier's staff tends to lean towards is to really focus on themselves versus focusing on the new things that maybe Detroit or a team in the future may do. Now, how do you combat that? Any coach will tell you when you go into halftime, you go over your mistakes and what's really affecting you, and you have to maybe come up with some new wrinkles in order to not only combat that, but also keep the team on their heels in the second half. So I'd like to see some more adjustment, some more innovative stuff, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and get some leads, and then therefore you can unleash that defensive line that the Vikings have been known for the last 5 to 10 years.
Well, when we turn our attention to the defense, in this case it was a rarity, and the Viking defense and coordinator Alan Williams' group just got mauled in all phases of the game on Sunday. But even more troubling was that Williams and defensive end Jared Allen said in post-game news conferences that they didn't expect some of the things the Lions did with Reggie Bush. Jay, how can that be when Bush was the number one offseason acquisition in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, that's very alarming in itself, just because not only was he the number one acquisition, Reggie Bush is an explosive player. He was explosive in college. He was explosive with the Saints. He was explosive last couple of years with the Dolphins. He's become a better inside runner than he was when he first came into the NFL. So then, therefore, what that tells you as a defensive player, not only is he a good inside runner, he's a great outside runner, then also that makes him more effective in the pass game. As you saw, he had, over 90 yards receiving, both running and passing. So it was a big day for him. I was very surprised to hear that, considering he is their number one running back. I know you have to game plan for Calvin Johnson, but you can game plan in this league for more than one person, especially somebody of the caliber of Reggie Bush.
Yeah, well, one of the problems the defense had in stopping Bush was at the linebacker spot, which is obviously your expertise, and all of them struggled. Chad Greenway, Aaron Henderson, and Marvin Mitchell. They all looked really slow to react, and Mitchell himself contributed 0 tackles and 0 assists. Now, what did this group do wrong, and is there really any reason to leave a playmaker like Desmond Bishop on the bench next week?
Look, when Desmond Bishop didn't get into the game, I was very, very surprised. And like I said, I'm surprised he's not starting because he's an established player, a big-time playmaker, and I think that he would have done really well matching up a guy against like Reggie Bush. They did look very slow to react. They looked a little sluggish. I don't know what to equate that to just because it's the first game of the season. I don't think anybody has too many of injury concerns as far as the linebacker group goes. So I look for Bishop to play hopefully a bigger role this week. Considering them with Mitchell's performance and also Bishop's performance in the preseason, I think he deserves a shot, and obviously I think he'll take advantage of it. And I think that he will help the production of overall the linebackers in there and bring more confidence to that defense. And then also with Big Williams coming back hopefully in the future, I look for the defense to play better overall as a unit as well.
When Bishop came in, if you were the defensive coordinator, would you slot him in the middle, or do you think Aaron Henderson's doing well enough that you put Bishop on the outside right now?
For his skill set, I wouldn't mind seeing him in the middle, but then also I wouldn't mind seeing him on the weak side either, just because he's a versatile player. He's a playmaker no matter where he's at. So essentially I would just see where does Aaron Henderson perform the best. And to me, it might be at the will. But then Bishop can perform on the inside. So you have the best of both worlds. You have tons of options with those 3 linebackers because they're all versatile. They all can play the pass. They all can play the run. They all can make big plays. I guess when you're in the middle, that's more of a leadership role. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Aaron Henderson handles that role, and then also to go out there and put big plays in the middle, because he looked a little bit stiff at times in the middle. He didn't look as physical as he was last year playing on the weak side. So it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward, who starts where and how they all mix together as a unit.
Well, this week the Vikings head to Soldier Field to play the Chicago Bears, and it's always been a difficult place for the Vikings to play, as it is for most NFL teams. What does Minnesota need to do against the Bears on the road to come away with a victory this week?
One, defensively, they have to limit the big plays from Jay Cutler and primarily to Brandon Marshall. And then obviously, you have to game plan for a running back again. You have Forte. So you have Marshall and Forte. You have to limit those two on the amount of touches that they get, but then also the big plays that they get against you as a defense. As far as offensively, the Bears have always been a great defense. They've been known to play that Tampa 2 rough and tough type of defense. So you're going to have to take what they give you, but then also establish the run game, and then get at least 2 to 4 plays, explosive plays in the pass game, whether it's through Jennings or Rudolph or even Adrian Peterson on the screen game, then obviously not turn over the ball. I think the Vikings will win the game.
It's kind of scary when you think about the Bear defense that you talk about, even though they had a tough game against Cincinnati and won that, and Tillman, had apparently a really bad stomach virus, was sick throughout the game, and yet he still got 2 interceptions. So it's scary to think about what he might do when he's healthy.
Yeah, he's a great cornerback. The Bears defense has been playing together for a while. Obviously, with the big loss of Brian Urlacher, the Bears defense is going to be a little bit weaker. But they have Bostic, who's a rookie who's playing well. Then also they brought over DJ Williams from the Broncos. So I think that the Bears are always going to be a tough defense. It's built into the city of Chicago, built into that organization. The Vikings offense is going to have their work cut out for them, but also Adrian Peterson has done pretty well against the Bears. So I'm excited to see what the Vikings offense does against the Bears this weekend.
Well, elsewhere around the league in Week 1, Seattle struggled to a 12-7 win against Carolina. Any cause for concern for the Seahawks?
I would just say a little bit, just because of their offense. They weren't able to put up any big numbers and score points. Primarily, they didn't score a touchdown. They only scored obviously 12 points. But you also have to give credit to the Carolina Panthers, because their defense is a young, up-and-coming defense. They have a great defensive line, some really good linebackers, and some young upcoming defensive backs. So they went out and played pretty well against Seattle, matched them in the physicality department. And when you can do that with Seattle, that's always going to give you a chance to win. So I'm not too concerned now. If it becomes something repetitive in games 2, 3, 4, and 5, then there's something to really look into. But one game, I wouldn't really push the panic button. And the biggest thing that they did is they won the game, and that's all that really matters.
Right. On the other side, Kansas City whipped Jacksonville 30-2, and the Jaguars gained only 178 yards in their opening day home loss. Is it time for them to make a quarterback change from Blaine Gabbert to Chad Henne at this point?
I think so. I think that Blaine Gabbert was tremendously overrated coming out of college. That was back when they would just pick anybody that had the PR department, through their agent, to be first-round picks. Chad Henne has performed well every time he's gotten in the game at Jacksonville. And then also it will set you up to draft a true franchise quarterback in the future, because Jacksonville needs a new face of that franchise, and unfortunately Blaine Gabbert isn't it.
Well, that brings a close to this edition of Jay Foreman's All-Out Blitz, and Jay will return next week on VikFans.com to review the game against the Bears and preview the Vikings home opener against the Cleveland Browns at Mall of America Field. So until next week, I'm Tom Moore.
And I'm Jay Foreman.
So long, everyone.